My mother passed away from an illness when I was in elementary school. Since then, my father had been raising me, but he started bringing a woman around. Patricia, nice to meet you. She smiled as she said that, and I felt something in her that reminded me of my mother. She seemed much younger than my father, but she was kind to me, and when my father proposed remarriage, I accepted, right away. Now, I would have a mother too. For my younger self, this was a joyous occasion. I still remember it, even 30 years later. Back then, I never thought things would turn out like this. My name is Patricia, a 40-year-old homemaker. I live with my husband and daughter. For about a year now, I've been visiting my father in the hospital where he's been admitted. Cancer was found in him, and by that time, it was too late for surgery. He's now in palliative care, but he's outliving the prognosis given by the doctors. When my family and I visit, he's delighted to see his granddaughter's face, and it lifts his spirit. Every time I see my father smile, I remember the past. My mother died, and 3 years later, my father remarried. Looking back, I realized that as a child who lost her mother, I often asked my father, "Can you come to open house? Can you make it to field day? When can we go out next?" Maybe he thought I needed a mother. Fortunately, my grandparents lived nearby, so they looked after me when my father was at work. But when they came to school events, I was laughed at by my friends, and I even told them not to come to school anymore. Everyone else had their mothers, but I was different. Now I should be grateful to my grandparents, but back then, as a child, I couldn't think that way. My father remarried a woman named Jessica, who was 10 years younger than him. She had a smile like my mother's, so I felt comforted by it. I couldn't quite call her mom, but I began to think of Jessica as my mother. Jessica loved me too. But 3 years later, after my brother was born, everything changed. It's natural for her to adore her own son. I might have forgiven that, but Jessica started to be harsh with me. "You're really not a cute child, are you?" After hearing that, something changed inside me. It became hard to be at home, but as a middle schooler, there was nothing I could do. I used to visit my grandparents, but Jessica's snide comments made it hard to go. I didn't want to worry my father or grandparents, so I couldn't even talk to them about it. I just endured. My brother clearly knew he was favored, and he joined Jessica in being mean to me. I left home as soon as I graduated from high school, finally escaping Jessica's snide remarks. More than 10 years later, my father said something surprising. Was it Jessica's fault that I left home, or did I really want to go to college? When I asked my father why he brought this up, he said he overheard Jessica talking to my brother. She had said that it would be a waste to pay for my college, so she made sure I didn't go. And she told me to move out and live on my own. And they were laughing about it, parent and child. My father had begun to notice that things might not be going well between Jessica and me, but he never thought that she and my brother had disliked me so much, and for so long. I told him everything honestly. How things were good at first, how she was kind, how it all changed after my brother was born, how I couldn't tell my father or grandparents, and how I never intended to tell my father, since my brother was important to him too. My father apologized to me. However, I'm already out of the house and no longer a child. There's no particular problem even if I'm estranged from my mother-in-law. And so, time passed. When I went to visit my father, I sometimes ran into Jessica and my brother. Something about Jessica seemed off. I overheard her whispering with my brother. "How long will it last? How much inheritance is there?" I couldn't believe they were talking about such things in the hospital. She seems to visit often, perhaps to appear devoted, but the other day she took all the snacks brought as gifts and left right away. Unbelievable. My father sighs at Jessica and my brother's behavior. He told me he wanted to leave me more inheritance, and said he would consult a lawyer. I was surprised at first, but apparently since I left home, my father had been treated with disrespect. I wish he had told me sooner, but he didn't want to worry me, he said. Parents and children think alike, don't they? My father's smile as he said this was memorable. One day when I went to visit, my father was out for a test, so I decided to take his laundry home. Jessica and my brother came in. "Oh, here again? Trying to show how much you love Dad to get more inheritance, huh?" Jessica said, laughing. I had a bad feeling, so I said I was going to the restroom, left my things, and exited the room. When I returned about 10 minutes later, Jessica was hurriedly hiding something. I just greeted her and left. A month later, my father passed away suddenly. Time flew by with the wake and funeral. Once everything was over, I went back to my parents' house to sort out my father's belongings. He had asked me to do so while he was alive. Then Jessica came. "Don't take anything valuable." I was stunned by her words. Then she and my brother brought an envelope. "Oh yes, about the inheritance? He said he's not leaving anything for you." "What?" I didn't understand. Inside the envelope was a paper marked as a will. "My daughter, who quickly abandoned her parents' house, has no intention of leaving an inheritance. Instead, I'll leave it to my devoted wife and son," Jessica said. There's no way my father would say that. But indeed, in my father's handwriting, the will stated that the inheritance would go to his wife and son. Aren't wills supposed to be unsealed, only in the presence of a lawyer? I argued with my limited knowledge, and she said this was a copy, and the official document was with the lawyer. Jessica didn't stop. "I'm relieved to have had a hard-working husband. Now my life is secure. I can live a wealthy life with my only son." My brother was smirking along with her. The disappointing daughter must take after her mother, marrying a man with no real income. How pitiful. I was furious at those words. What? What do you know about my mother? And my husband is a much better person than you, and he earns enough to allow me to be a homemaker. I could forgive her talking about me, but I was enraged when she spoke about my mother and husband. However, Jessica was unfazed. "Well, that doesn't matter. Anyway, I've got the inheritance. Just take the worthless things as keepsakes. Now please, leave, stranger." I never thought she could be this kind of person. All she talked about was inheritance and money. I didn't want anything more to do with her. Understood. Jessica smirked at my words and brought out a large travel bag. "Well, we're going on a 3-week vacation. Now that we have the inheritance, we'll have a blast." I was amazed that she could do such a thing right after her husband's death. I left my parents' house, speechless and wondering why my father never divorced such a person. The next day, a man claiming to be a lawyer appeared at my door. He had known my father for a long time and smiled nostalgically at me. That's when I learned a shocking truth. Jessica and my brother had gone on vacation. Apparently, they wouldn't be back for 3 weeks. During that time, I went to my parents' house to sort things out and requested the house be demolished. My father had arranged everything before his death, and the demolition went smoothly. On the day Jessica and my brother returned from vacation, I ambushed them with a lawyer at the site where my parents' house once stood. They screamed. "What is this? What's going on?" I had the house demolished. Everything that wasn't mine or my father's is stored in a self-storage unit. "What are you talking about? This is our house! How dare you demolish it without permission? Compensate us, right now!" Jessica yelled at me, but I calmly replied, "This house and land are mine, so I can do what I want. Besides, my father told me to demolish it." Jessica, furious, showed me the will from earlier. "Look at this will! It says it's ours!" I was amazed at how important the inheritance was to her, that she took the will on vacation. "That will is a fake," I said, and Jessica was furious. "That's impossible! Look! The date and name are written here!" I was astonished at her desperation and retorted, "My father had entrusted the real will to a lawyer, and he had arranged for the inheritance. It states that only part of the savings goes to you two, while the house, land, and other savings go to me. Also, my father had arranged for the demolition of this old house, saying it would be better to sell the land." My father, realizing that Jessica and my brother were only interested in the inheritance, had consulted a lawyer after being hospitalized. Every time Jessica visited the hospital room, she pressured him to write a will, leaving the inheritance only to them. She even said the hospital fees were a waste and that he should die soon. It seems that even my father was furious about this, but if he divorced now, he'd have to divide the property. He thought that if he had to leave his assets to such a wife, he couldn't divorce. Over and over, he was told about the will, and my father said, "I wrote the will in the presence of a lawyer. This is a copy of it," and handed it to Jessica. That seems to be the paper from earlier. It seems that Jessica and my brother are to receive a few $1,000s each, but according to the lawyer, they were together as husband and wife, and he's her real son. There's no love, but there's compassion, so he decided to leave that much. Jessica and my brother were stunned, but I spoke even harsher words. You're lucky to even get a few $1,000s, but you destroyed the will, didn't you? In that case, you lose all rights to inherit. Then Jessica was visibly shaken. What are you talking about? That's not true. At that point, I played the voice recorder. It was the voice recorder I had hidden in my belongings when I said I was going to the bathroom, after finding my father was out for a test when I entered his hospital room. The conversation between Jessica and my brother, who came in later, was perfectly recorded. It included the fact that my father was angry at Jessica's attitude and wrote a will leaving everything to me, and that they had destroyed it. The day before, Jessica and my brother had visited, but my father was furious at their usual attitude. In that flow, he called a lawyer to write a will leaving all his inheritance to me, and he had kept the written will. That day, Jessica and my brother came to the hospital room, probably to get forgiveness from my father. But unluckily, it was me in the hospital room, not my father. However, they found the will while I was away and tore it up. With this, the will is invalid. Now all we have to do is make him rewrite it to leave all the inheritance to us. Though it's only a voice, I can picture them grinning. What they hid in a hurry when I returned was the torn up will. You really are a nasty girl! I hear the same line after decades, but I'm not a child anymore. I laughed at that. I don't care. It was my childhood home too, but I'd rather lose it than let you two live there. Then my brother interrupts the conversation. Hey, Mom, what about the $10,000 you spent on the trip? Hearing this, Jessica is visibly shaken. Apparently, she thought my father's inheritance was coming and had been spending quite lavishly. I wonder how one can spend $10,000 in just 3 weeks. Jessica suddenly changes her attitude and turns to me for help. Patricia, we're family, aren't we? You'll share a little with us, right? What? What are you thinking? I don't consider you family. Besides, your son is in the prime of his career, so he can pay that amount right away, can't he? Since he's good enough to belittle someone's husband, he'll surely earn it for you, won't he? I left Jessica and my brother, who were in a state of confusion, and walked away from the scene. Later, I found out that my brother had apparently quit the company he used to work for. He made a mistake at work and didn't like being guided by his boss, so he predicted that he could live without working, now that he had my father's inheritance. And he had been wandering around, without even looking for a new job. It seems he had a hard time finding a place to live, but somehow he rented an old apartment, and the two of them started part-time jobs. I thought it was strange for someone in the prime of their career, almost 30, to be working a part-time job, but he probably couldn't find a new position. Jessica had always been a housewife, so she seems to be struggling with work, but this is the retribution for expecting my father's inheritance. The land where my father's house once stood is now being used as a parking lot, serving the residents. My father would surely be pleased. I'm truly glad I was able to protect my father's legacy.